Jimin gives his beloved doll to Jungkook at fan meeting Teddy sparkling. Jungkook's reaction makes ARMY melt. The lights in the arena flickered, casting sharp, almost theatrical shadows across the sea of fans, each holding their light sticks aloft like a constellation trapped on Earth. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of perfume, sweat, and anticipation, vibrating with 1,000 hearts beating in sync. Jimin's gaze darted nervously across the stage, his fingers brushing against the soft fabric of a small, worn doll clutched tightly in his hand. He could feel the pressure of 1,000 eyes, not just the fans, but Jungkook, too, who stood a few meters away, his own expression unreadable, though his eyes betrayed the smallest flicker of curiosity. "Are you ready?" whispered the stage manager, though Jimin barely heard her. His attention was anchored solely on the boy with the tousled black hair, whose lips curved into a faint, almost teasing smile that made Jimin's chest tighten. Jimin swallowed, the doll's stitched smile looking almost accusatory now, and in an impulsive, breathless decision, he stepped closer to Jungkook. Each step felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty, and yet the doll seemed to pulse with warmth in his hands, as if urging him forward. The fans screamed as Jimin approached Jungkook, their voices a tidal wave that made his ears ring. He could barely hear himself think, but the world narrowed to the boy's chocolate-brown eyes, wide and unwavering, fixed solely on him. Without a word, Jimin extended his hand, offering the doll like a fragile secret. The silence between them was sudden, a bubble of stillness in a storm, and the entire arena seemed to hold its breath. Jungkook's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, and he reached out, his fingers brushing Jimin, with a delicate hesitance that sent sparks shooting through Jimin's veins. You want me to have this?" Jungkook asked, his voice low, almost reverent, trembling with something Jimin couldn't yet name. I want you to have it," Jimin admitted, his own voice betraying the flutter of nerves beneath the surface. "It's special to me, and I want it to be special to you too." The doll changed hands slowly, reverently, like passing a flame. Jungkook's fingers lingered on Jimin's longer than necessary, sending a wave of heat through both of them. He lifted the doll and examined it as though discovering a hidden universe inside its tiny stitched eyes. It's perfect," he whispered, a shy smile tugging at his lips. "Just like you." Jimin's heart threatened to burst, an intoxicating mixture of relief, fear, and exhilaration coursing through his body. The fans erupted into a frenzy of cheers and cries, but the noise seemed distant, muffled, irrelevant. All that existed in that moment was the heat of Jungkook's gaze, the soft fabric of the doll, and the sharp, thrilling edge of vulnerability that they had both exposed. For a brief heartbeat, Jimin feared that the moment would shatter, that some invisible wall would rise between them again. But then, Jungkook's hand brushed against his cheek, impossibly light, yet heavy with meaning. "I'll take care of it," Jungkook said softly, and the sincerity in his voice was like a balm to Jimin's frayed nerves. "I'll take care of you too." The doll, now clutched tightly against Jungkook's chest, seemed to radiate an energy that mirrored the unspoken bond forming between them, a fragile, secret thread spun of trust, longing, and tentative hope. Jimin stepped back reluctantly, his pulse still racing, yet unable to hide the smile blooming on his lips. As they moved back to their respective spots on stage, the tension lingered, invisible yet undeniable, weaving around them like a delicate net. Every glance, every subtle movement carried weight. The fans may have cheered and screamed for idols, but for Jimin and Jungkook, the arena had become a universe apart, a place where secrets could be shared in a stolen moment, where a small doll could hold more emotion than 1,000 words. Backstage, after the fan meeting ended, Jimin sank onto the couch, still feeling the echo of Jungkook's touch on his cheek. His mind raced with questions and possibilities. What did this mean for them beyond the stage? Could this fragile intimacy survive the glare of the world, the chaos of schedules, cameras, and expectations? Yet, beneath the doubt, a small, fierce flame of hope burned steadily. He had offered a piece of his heart in the form of a simple doll, and somehow, Jungkook had accepted it without hesitation. Meanwhile, Jungkook held the doll close, his fingers tracing the delicate seams with almost obsessive care. He could feel Jimin's presence lingering in the fabric, a warmth that defied reason. His own heart pounded, a mixture of awe and unsteady excitement. Never had a simple object carried so much weight. Never had a gesture felt so intimate, so profoundly personal. The doll became more than a gift. It became a symbol of trust, of unspoken emotions, and of the fragile, intricate dance between two hearts learning to speak without words. And in that delicate silence, in that fleeting moment of connection amidst chaos, something undeniable had begun, a bond that neither stage lights nor screaming fans could ever diminish. The world around them was vast, noisy, chaotic, but for Jimin and Jungkook, it had narrowed to a single heartbeat, a single thread of understanding, unbreakable and infinitely precious. The dressing room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in corners like they were listening. Jimin paced slowly, the faint click of his shoes against the floor sounding unnaturally loud, each step mirroring the thrum of his racing heartbeat. He could still feel the heat of Jungkook's gaze lingering on him, the weight of the doll between Jungkook's hands almost burning through his chest. He swallowed hard, trying to force down the dizzying mixture of desire, fear, and embarrassment twisting inside him. Jungkook entered quietly, leaning against the doorway with that infuriating calmness that always made Jimin's defenses crumble. "You're thinking too much," Jungkook said, his voice low, teasing, and somehow dangerous, like the edge of a storm. His eyes were dark, intense, locking onto Jimin in a way that made him forget how to breathe. I'm not," Jimin stammered, though the way his cheeks burned betrayed him. He hated how easy it was for Jungkook to see right through him, to detect the smallest tremor of uncertainty or longing. "Liar," Jungkook said with a half-smile, stepping closer, shrinking the space between them until it was almost unbearable. The air between them seemed to sizzle, charged with unspoken tension. "You're thinking about that doll, about me, about this." His hand hovered, almost brushing Jimin, and Jimin's stomach flipped in a dizzying whirl of nerves and heat. Jimin stopped, unsure how to confess that every thought, every heartbeat, had been pulled toward Jungkook since the moment he stepped on stage. That giving the doll wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration he had no courage to voice in words. Jungkook's smile softened, just slightly, and he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Jimin's forehead with the gentlest touch that somehow ignited everything inside Jimin at once. "You don't have to say it. I feel it. I know." The words were soft, intimate, carrying a weight that made Jimin's knees weak. And then, without warning, Jungkook's hand slipped lower, grazing Jimin's arm in a deliberate, lingering motion that made his breath hitch. "Do you even realize how reckless you are?" Jungkook murmured, his voice thick, edged with something Jimin couldn't name: desire, possession, danger. "Putting yourself out there like this, letting me see every piece of you." I can't help it," Jimin whispered, his voice trembling, betraying the fire building inside him. "You make me feel like everything I try to hide is suddenly visible." Jungkook's lips curved into a dark, knowing smile. "Then maybe you shouldn't hide it," he said, closing the distance until their bodies were almost touching. Jimin could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle brush of skin that made his pulse spike. "Maybe it's time you stopped pretending." Jimin swallowed hard, the intensity of the moment almost too much to bear. He had dreamed of this, imagined it in quiet, secret moments, but reality was far more overwhelming. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick and electric, charged with desire, fear, and unspoken longing. And then the door burst open. A stage manager's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Guys, the press, there's a photographer here, you need to get out." Both Jimin and Jungkook froze, the sudden intrusion shattering the fragile bubble of intimacy. Jimin's cheeks burned crimson as Jungkook gave him one last lingering look, intense and unreadable, before he stepped back, adjusting his jacket and slipping past the door with an almost casual air. But the heat between them didn't dissipate. It lingered, heavy and suffocating, leaving Jimin trembling and breathless. Later, in the privacy of his hotel room, Jimin couldn't stop replaying the encounter in his mind. Every brush of skin, every heated glance, every word spoken, and some left unspoken, kept him on the edge of obsession. The doll sat on his nightstand, innocuous and soft, but now it felt like a talisman, a reminder of Jungkook's touch, of the dangerous closeness they had just shared. Meanwhile, Jungkook's room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The doll rested on his desk, and he found himself staring at it for minutes longer than necessary, tracing the stitches with his fingers, imagining Jimin's hands doing the same. The simplicity of the gift had turned into a symbol of something far more complicated: trust, vulnerability, desire, and the unspoken tension that threatened to consume them both if left unchecked. Later that evening, messages began to flood Jungkook's phone. Fans had caught glimpses of the doll on stage and immediately exploded with speculation. Jimin had been careful, but the fandom was relentless. Screenshots circulated, fans whispering, theorizing, shipping every glance, every touch. Jungkook read the messages, smirking darkly. "Let them talk," he muttered to himself. "They don't know anything." But deep down, both of them knew this was just the beginning. Every interaction, every stolen glance, every carefully hidden gesture was a spark. And sparks, left unchecked, could ignite into something uncontrollable, consuming everything in their path. By the time night fell, both were restless, their minds consumed by thoughts of the other. Jimin lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining Jungkook's touch, the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze. Jungkook sat on the edge of his own bed, the doll clutched to his chest, replaying every word, every moment. Both were caught in a storm of desire, secrecy, and the intoxicating thrill of what was forbidden yet inevitable. And somewhere in the quiet between the chaos, both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The doll had become more than a gift. It had become a key, unlocking doors they hadn't dared to open, doors leading to passion, conflict, and emotions too powerful to ignore. The lights of the practice studio were harsh, almost cruel, casting long, angular shadows across the polished floor. Jimin's reflection stared back at him from the mirrored wall, but it felt like a stranger's face, tense, restless, haunted by thoughts he couldn't admit aloud. His hands itched with the memory of Jungkook's touch, the faint brush of fingers that had left him trembling and achingly aware of every nerve in his body. Jungkook entered without knocking, his presence filling the room immediately. He didn't smile, not really, but there was a dangerous glint in his eyes that made Jimin's pulse spike uncontrollably. "You've been avoiding me," Jungkook said, stepping closer, the deliberate slow of his movements radiating intent. "Don't pretend you're too busy. I know you, Jimin." Jimin's stomach twisted. I'm just focused on practice," he said, voice tight, betraying him. But his eyes flicked to Jungkook constantly, the urge to reach for him, to close the gap, impossible to suppress. "Focused," Jungkook repeated, voice low, teasing but threaded with something darker. He closed the distance between them until their shoulders almost brushed. "Focused on what? Dodging me? Because it's not working. You can't hide from me, not really." His breath was warm against Jimin's ear, a dangerous, tantalizing proximity that made Jimin's knees weak. Jimin swallowed hard, the studio suddenly too small, too hot. "I'm not avoiding you," he whispered, though every tremor in his voice contradicted him. I can't, this is complicated." Jungkook's lips curled into a sly, almost predatory smile. "Complicated? Since when does anything between us stay simple? Look at us, Jimin. Look at what you did on stage. That doll, it was more than a gift. Don't act like you didn't mean it." Jimin's cheeks burned. "I didn't mean for it to, His words faltered, cut short by the rush of emotion that always hit when Jungkook was this close. There was a tension in the air that crackled like electricity, a dangerous mix of longing, frustration, and unspoken desire. Jungkook reached out and grabbed Jimin's wrist, spinning him gently so that their bodies were pressed together. The contact was brief but incendiary, enough to make Jimin's heart hammer against his ribcage. "Stop pretending," Jungkook murmured, his forehead resting lightly against Jimin's. "Stop pretending you don't want this. Don't lie to me or to yourself." Jimin's lips parted, words caught in his throat. Every nerve screamed, every instinct urged him forward, yet the world outside loomed ominously. They were idols, constantly watched, judged, dissected by millions. And yet, here in this dimly lit room, none of that mattered. Only Jungkook and the dangerous intimacy that was wrapping around them like smoke. "You make it impossible to think straight," Jimin admitted finally, his voice a breathless confession. Every time you look at me, touch me, I can't. Stop talking, Jungkook said sharply, his lips brushing Jimin's ear, his hands sliding up to cup Jimin's face. The contact was electric, intimate, dangerous. Just feel it. Feel what's happening instead of overthinking every second. The room seemed to shrink, every sound, every breath amplified. Jimin's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he leaned instinctively toward Jungkook, drawn to the heat and intensity of him like a moth to flame. Jungkook's eyes darkened, almost predatory, as he leaned closer, a whispered promise lingering in the space between them. You don't even realize what you do to me, he said, voice rough, loaded with emotion. Every look, every gesture, it destroys me. Jimin's knees weakened, but the walls of caution he had built began to crumble. He wanted, needed, and feared the next moment in equal measure. I can't control it, he whispered, trembling. I don't want to, but I can't. Then the moment was shattered. A sharp knock on the door, followed by the manager's tense voice, jolted them back into reality. Jimin, Jungkook, there's a live broadcast in 5 minutes. Get ready. Both froze, the sudden intrusion tearing apart the fragile, intimate bubble they had formed. Jimin's cheeks flamed red while Jungkook's jaw tightened, eyes dark with suppressed frustration and longing. They stepped back, adjusting posture, masks of composure falling back into place. Yet beneath the forced calm, the heat remained, lingering, simmering, impossible to ignore. Backstage, as cameras began to roll, whispers and murmurs followed them. Fans had already spotted the tension earlier, the stolen glances, the slight brush of hands. Social media buzzed like a storm, speculation and rumor spiraling out of control. Some screenshotted every subtle gesture, dissecting each interaction. Both Jimin and Jungkook could feel it, the pressure, the heat of countless eyes dissecting their every movement. And yet, despite the chaos, the whispers, the intrusive lenses, they couldn't stop the magnetic pull between them. A subtle touch here, a lingering glance there, it was a secret language, silent but incendiary. Every time they caught each other's eyes, the world outside melted away, leaving only a dangerous, thrilling intimacy neither could resist. Later that night, in the solitude of their hotel rooms, the tension continued to smolder. Jimin lay awake, fingers brushing the edges of the doll, feeling the residual warmth, imagining Jungkook holding it close, his eyes dark and full of intensity. Jungkook, across the hall, traced the stitches, imagining the softness of Jimin's hands, the warmth of his skin. Both were caught in a storm of desire, secrecy, and emotional turbulence. Every message notification, every fan comment, every rumor only stoked the fire. And in that chaos, both knew something undeniable. What had begun as a small, tender gesture had transformed into a tempest, heated, controversial, impossible to tame, and intoxicating beyond measure. The next day, when cameras flashed and fans screamed their names, Jimin and Jungkook moved through the motions with professional precision, but the heat lingered, visible to anyone with eyes to see. A subtle touch here, a fleeting glance there, enough for the observant to notice, but hidden enough to make the world wonder. Their hearts were tethered together in a dangerous dance, each step forward threatening to ignite a blaze that could consume them both. And in that dangerous tension, both of them realized the truth. They were addicted to it. To the proximity, to the risk, to the emotional storm that neither could resist. The doll had been the spark, but the fire was far from over. Deliciously alive. The morning sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains, cutting across Jimin's bed like an unwelcome spotlight. He had barely slept, tossing and turning as images of the previous night replayed endlessly in his mind. The brush of Jungkook's fingers, the intensity in his gaze, the dangerous heat in every whispered word. The world outside seemed impossibly distant, yet he could already feel the tremors of chaos brewing beyond these walls. Jungkook appeared in the doorway, casual, confident, but there was an unmistakable fire burning behind his dark eyes. "You look like hell," he said softly, though there was a teasing edge in his tone. "And yet, somehow, you're irresistible." Jimin's cheeks flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and something darker, something raw and undeniable. I couldn't sleep," he admitted, voice small, almost vulnerable. "I keep thinking about last night about you." Jungkook crossed the room in long, fluid strides, stopping just behind the edge of the bed. His hand hovered near Jimin's shoulder, a deliberate tease, sending shivers down Jimin's spine. "You think I'm not thinking about you?" Jungkook's voice was low, almost a growl. "Every second, every moment, and I'm not even sorry for it." Jimin swallowed, breath hitching, aware of the magnetic pull between them. "It's dangerous," he whispered. "If anyone finds out." Jungkook's fingers brushed lightly against Jimin's neck, tracing a slow, deliberate path that made his pulse spike. "Let them find out," he said softly, eyes dark and smoldering. "Let the world talk, speculate, and judge, because none of that matters. You're mine, and no one can change that." Jimin's resolve melted under the weight of Jungkook's gaze, the intensity of the words, the closeness that seemed almost suffocating in its intensity. I don't know if I can." "Stop talking," Jungkook interrupted, leaning closer, lips brushing against the shell of Jimin's ear. The heat of him, the dangerous edge of desire in his voice, made Jimin's body betray him. "Just feel it, feel us, right here, right now." Jimin's hands trembled as they found Jungkook, fingers intertwining. The tension between them was unbearable, the air thick with desire, fear, and unspoken longing. Every touch, every whispered word ignited something primal, consuming a fire that neither could ignore. And then the phone buzzed, a notification from social media. Jimin froze, heart sinking as he glimpsed the screenshots circulating online. Fans had caught a fleeting moment from last night, the subtle intimacy between them, and rumors were already exploding. The comments were a storm: excitement, speculation, judgment, obsession. Jungkook noticed immediately, his hand tightening around Jimin's. "Ignore it," he said firmly, voice low and commanding. "The world can't touch this, not us, not what's between us." But the storm was already in motion. The media caught wind, and by noon, headlines began surfacing, questioning, speculating, scandalous enough to make anyone's stomach twist. Jimin tried to retreat into himself, fear and shame coiling like a snake around his chest. This could ruin everything," he whispered, voice cracking. Jungkook's hands cupped his face, forcing him to meet his eyes. "No," he said, sharp, insistent. "It won't. I won't let it. You're mine. And no one, not fans, not reporters, not the world, can take that from us." There was a dangerous intensity in his gaze, a possessiveness that made Jimin shiver. Every rational thought clashed with every desire, every impulse screaming surrender. He could feel the world outside pressing in, but here, in Jungkook's presence, the chaos felt distant, meaningless. Hours later, in the quiet of their shared practice room, the tension shifted, became almost unbearable. Jungkook pressed closer, hands roaming, touches deliberate, igniting every nerve ending in Jimin's body. "Do you know what you do to me?" he whispered, lips brushing against Jimin's neck, voice thick with emotion and desire. "Every glance, every word, every hesitation, you destroy me." I don't want to," Jimin gasped, trembling, body on fire, mind dizzy with conflicting emotions. I can't stop thinking about you, about us." "You don't have to stop," Jungkook murmured, voice low, intimate, a dangerous edge threading through it. "I don't want you to. I want every part of you, every thought, every desire, every secret you try to hide." Jimin's breath hitched, every instinct screaming surrender. The world outside, the rumors, the chaos, it all faded into irrelevance. There was only this, dangerous, intoxicating, consuming. He leaned into Jungkook, lips nearly touching, eyes locked in a battle of desire and restraint. "Promise me," Jungkook whispered, almost hoarse. "Promise me you won't run, not now, not ever." Jimin nodded, heart hammering. I can't, I don't want to." And in that quiet, charged moment, they both understood. The storm outside, the fans, the headlines, the rumors, was nothing compared to the storm between them. Dangerous, unrelenting, irresistible. As the evening descended, they finally allowed themselves a brief moment of peace, sitting close on the practice room floor, fingers entwined, the doll resting between them like a silent witness. Every brush of skin, every stolen glance, every whispered word bound them closer, threading desire and trust into a fragile, intoxicating web. And somewhere in the quiet intensity of that stolen moment, both of them knew one undeniable truth. Nothing could contain this. Nothing could stop it. The world might scream, judge, and speculate, but they were theirs completely, irrevocably, dangerously. The hotel corridor was eerily quiet, the faint hum of the air conditioning punctuating every step Jimin took. His heart raced, a mixture of excitement, fear, and the lingering heat of Jungkook's touch from the night before. He tried to calm himself, telling his mind to focus on rehearsal, on schedules, on anything but the magnetic pull that drew him toward Jungkook like gravity. But when Jungkook appeared at the end of the hall, leaning casually against the wall with that impossible, infuriating confidence, Jimin's resolve crumbled instantly. The dim light accentuated the sharp angles of his face, the subtle curve of a smile that promised danger, desire, and temptation in equal measure. "You've been avoiding me again," Jungkook said, voice low, almost teasing, but there was a sharp edge beneath it, a dangerous undercurrent that made Jimin shiver. "Do you even realize how much that does to me?" "I'm not avoiding you," Jimin murmured, though his own trembling hands betrayed him. "I'm trying to keep things under control." "Control," Jungkook echoed, stepping closer, the space between them charged and almost suffocating. "Control isn't an option when it comes to us, you know that." His fingers brushed Jimin's arm, a deliberate, lingering touch that sent electricity shooting through him. "You feel it, I feel it. Don't pretend you don't." Jimin swallowed hard, body tense, breath shallow. I can't let this, not here, not like this," he whispered, the panic and desire in his voice colliding in a dangerous mix. "If anyone sees." Jungkook's lips brushed the shell of his ear, voice dropping to a husky whisper. "Then they'll see what they want to see, but I don't care. You're mine, and I won't hide anymore, not from you, not from anyone." The words hit Jimin like a physical force, igniting a fire deep inside him. He trembled, torn between fear, longing, and the reckless pull of temptation. I don't know if I can." "You can," Jungkook interrupted, his hand sliding up to cup Jimin's face, thumb brushing over his lips. "And you will, because you want it as much as I do. Don't lie to yourself." Jimin's body betrayed him, leaning into Jungkook's touch, drawn by the heat, the intensity, the dangerous intimacy that surged between them. Every nerve screamed, every thought dissolved into the raw, unrelenting desire that made him shiver and ache all at once. And then the door burst open. The sudden intrusion jolted them apart, and Jimin's cheeks flamed crimson. A group of staff members, unaware of the private moment, entered with schedules and equipment, breaking the fragile, heated bubble. Jungkook straightened instantly, adjusting his jacket, eyes still smoldering as they flicked to Jimin with that knowing, dangerous look that promised the storm wasn't over. Hours later, during rehearsal, the tension was palpable. Every glance between them carried weight, every accidental touch ignited sparks, and the staff began whispering, noticing the chemistry, the subtle intimacy that lingered despite the professional setting. Jimin tried to focus on choreography, on lyrics, on rhythm, but every beat was punctuated by the ghost of Jungkook's touch, the memory of whispered words that made his pulse race and his thoughts spiral. Then a text buzzed on Jimin's phone. It was a fan screenshot of them from earlier, the captions speculative, scandalous, and viral. Panic coiled in his chest. This is bad," he whispered under his breath, voice tight. Everyone will see." Jungkook appeared beside him before he could react, hand sliding over his shoulder, eyes sharp, possessive. "Let them watch," he said, voice low and commanding. "Let them talk. They don't matter. Not when it's just us, Jimin, not when it's real." Jimin trembled, heart hammering, both fear and desire coursing through him. "It's dangerous," he admitted, voice barely audible. "If anyone finds out." "They will," Jungkook said softly, lips brushing the side of Jimin's neck. "But I don't care. None of it matters. You're mine, and I'm not letting go." The intensity was unbearable, the desire almost suffocating, yet exhilarating in its recklessness. Jimin's body leaned instinctively toward Jungkook, their proximity a forbidden promise, every glance, every touch charged with dangerous intimacy. Later, in the quiet of a rehearsal room empty of staff, They allowed themselves the smallest of stolen moments. Fingers intertwined, whispered words, heated glances, the kind that spoke volumes without sound. Every brush of skin, every shared breath, every subtle shift of posture carried the weight of unspoken confessions, desires, and dangers. The doll rested on a nearby chair, innocuous and silent, but its presence was a reminder of the delicate, intoxicating connection that had started it all. Jungkook's fingers brushed the doll lightly, then reached for Jimin's hand, a silent declaration of ownership, intimacy, and desire that left Jimin trembling. "You know," Jungkook murmured, voice husky, almost possessive, "every time I see that doll, I think of you. Every stitch, every curve, it's like holding a piece of you. And I want more. I want all of you, Jimin, every part." Jimin's breath hitched, cheeks burning. I can't, it's too much," he whispered, trembling under the intensity, under the dangerous, intoxicating pull of Jungkook's words and presence. Jungkook's lips brushed the shell of his ear, a deliberate, intimate touch that sent shivers racing through him. "Then don't fight it," he said softly. "Don't fight me, don't fight us." And in that moment, Jimin realized he no longer wanted to fight. The world outside, the fans, the headlines, the chaos, faded into irrelevance. There was only this: Jungkook, heat, desire, and a dangerous, intoxicating storm that neither could resist and neither wanted to. The night had settled over the city like a velvet blanket, soft and heavy, yet inside the hotel room, the air was thick with unspoken words, lingering touches, and the quiet aftermath of the storm they had weathered together. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing the soft fabric of the doll, the symbol of their fragile, explosive connection. Every stitch, every worn seam carried memories of stolen glances, whispered words, and the heat of Jungkook's touch. Jungkook leaned against the doorway, casual but impossibly intense, eyes dark with emotion. "Are you thinking about everything again?" he asked softly, though his tone held that subtle edge that always made Jimin shiver. Yeah," Jimin admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "About us, about everything that happened." Jungkook stepped closer, hands sliding to cup Jimin's face, thumb brushing lightly over his cheek. "And..." Jimin's breath hitched, heart hammering. "And I don't regret a single moment," he confessed, voice trembling with honesty and relief. "Even with all the chaos, all the rumors, all the danger, I don't regret any of it." Jungkook's lips curved into a slow, satisfied smile. "Good," he said softly, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "Because neither do I you, you're mine, Jimin, and nothing, no one can change that." The doll sat quietly between them, innocent yet charged with meaning, a silent witness to the intimacy, the confessions, and the trust they had built. Jimin reached out, fingers brushing Jungkook, and the world outside seemed to fall away. The headlines, the speculation, the fans, they existed, yes, but none of it mattered here, not in this room, not in this moment. "Promise me something," Jimin whispered, voice small, vulnerable, yet full of trust. "Anything," Jungkook replied instantly. "Promise me that no matter what happens out there, we won't hide anymore, that we face it together." Jungkook's hands tightened around Jimin's, eyes burning with unwavering conviction. "I promise," he said, voice low, thick with emotion. "We face it all together, always." Jimin felt a weight lift from his chest, a release he hadn't realized he'd been holding onto for months. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty, they melted away in the warmth of Jungkook's presence. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to Jungkook's in a soft, lingering kiss, full of trust, passion, and the quiet declaration that whatever the world threw at them, they would endure it together. Outside, the city lights flickered and the rain began to fall gently, washing the streets clean. Inside, two hearts beat in synchrony, bound by desire, trust, and the shared knowledge that they had chosen each other, no matter the chaos, the controversy, or the danger. Jimin held the doll close, Jungkook's hand still gripping his, and in that quiet intimacy, they both knew this was no longer a fleeting spark or stolen moment. This was the start of something enduring, powerful, and entirely theirs. And for the first time in months, Jimin felt completely, undeniably safe, in Jungkook's arms, in their truth, and in the unspoken promise that nothing could ever come between them. The storm outside faded, but the fire between them burned brighter than ever, a quiet, dangerous, unbreakable flame. The story had begun with a simple gift, a doll, and it ended with something far greater: trust, passion, and a love that refused to be hidden, no matter the world watching.